Welcome to my channel. Listen to my stories every day. Comment, like and subscribe to my channel. Enjoy listening. The vibrant hum of the corporate party filled the spacious ballroom of the Grand Regency Hotel. Laughter, clinking glasses, and snippets of conversations blended into a cacophony of celebration. I wandered through the throng of colleagues, occasionally stopping to exchange pleasantries, but my mind was elsewhere. My wife, Emma, stood across the room, a vision of elegance in her deep blue dress, her laughter ringing out like a melody. She looked every bit the devoted partner, but tonight, something felt off. I excused myself from a tedious conversation with the head of accounting and drifted towards the quieter hallway near the boss's office. I needed a moment of solitude to clear my head. As I turned the corner, I caught sight of Emma standing alone, her phone pressed to her ear. Curious, I slowed my pace, staying just out of sight. "I'm already waiting for you. I'm wearing the very lingerie you gave me." Emma's voice was a hushed whisper, filled with excitement. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. This had to be a joke, some kind of misunderstanding. But her next words shattered any hope I had left. "Yes, I can't wait either. See you soon, darling." I leaned against the wall, my legs feeling like they might give way. The words echoed in my mind, each syllable a dagger to my heart. A movement down the hall caught my eye, and I saw him, Richard, my boss, sauntering towards his office with a satisfied grin plastered on his face. He didn't notice me as he passed by, too focused on his own thoughts. My stomach churned with a toxic mix of anger and betrayal. As Richard disappeared into his office, I clenched my fists, the urge to confront him boiling within me. But a different idea formed, one that would be far more satisfying. I would expose them both, embarrass them in front of everyone, and watch their perfect lives crumble. The plan took shape rapidly, fueled by the raw, burning need for revenge. I slipped back into the party, my eyes scanning the room for allies. I spotted Mark, a tech whiz from it, chatting with a group near the bar. Mark was a bit of a conspiracy theorist and loved a good scandal. I sidled up to him, forcing a smile. "Hey Mark, you got a minute?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Sure, what's up?" Mark replied, his curiosity piqued. "I need a favor. A big one. And I need you to keep it quiet," I said, leaning in closer. Mark's eyes widened, and he nodded eagerly. "What do you need?" I explained my plan in hushed tones, watching as his expression shifted from curiosity to shock to excitement. He agreed without hesitation, already thrilled at the prospect of some corporate drama. We needed access to Richard's office security feed, something Mark assured me he could handle. "Give me 10 minutes," Mark said, slipping away towards the elevators that led to the basement server room. I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline course through my veins. I needed to play my part convincingly while Mark worked his magic. I approached Emma, who was now chatting with a group of colleagues, her smile as radiant as ever. I slid an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Having a good time?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She glanced up at me, her eyes sparkling. "Yes, it's a wonderful party, isn't it?" "Absolutely," I replied, forcing a smile. "I was just thinking, we should get a picture together. To remember the night." Emma beamed, and we posed for a few photos, her arm around my waist, my smile hiding the storm brewing beneath the surface. I needed to keep her occupied, to make sure she didn't slip away to meet Richard before Mark completed his task. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Mark, all set. "Come to the office." "Hey, I need to check on something for work," I told Emma, feigning annoyance. "Can you hold down the fort for a bit?" She nodded, her attention already drifting back to her friends. I made my way towards Richard's office, my heart pounding harder with each step. The hallway was empty as I approached the door, knocking softly before letting myself in. Mark was at Richard's computer, the screen displaying the security feed from the past hour. "Got it," he said, handing me a USB drive. "Everything you need is on here. Good luck." "Thanks, Mark." "I owe you one," I said, clasping his shoulder. "Just make sure I'm there when it all goes down," he grinned. I left the office, the drive clutched tightly in my hand. Now came the hard part. I had to confront Emma and Richard, to expose their affair in the most public way possible. I returned to the party, scanning the room until I found Emma laughing with a group near the dance floor. Richard was nearby, his eyes occasionally drifting towards her. I took a deep breath and approached the DJ booth, signaling the DJ to cut the music. The sudden silence drew everyone's attention, and I stepped up to the microphone, the room falling into a curious hush. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice steady. "I hope you're all enjoying the party. I have a special presentation prepared for you all." I plugged the USB drive into the DJ's laptop, queuing up the security footage. The screen behind me flickered to life, showing the hallway outside Richard's office. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they recognized the scene: Emma on the phone, Richard passing by, their secret exchange. Emma's face paled, her eyes wide with shock. Richard's smug expression vanished, replaced by a look of sheer panic. I watched them both, my heart racing as the crowd's murmurs grew louder, turning into a chorus of disbelief and judgment. "This," I said, turning to face them, "is what happens when you betray the trust of those who care about you. Enjoy the rest of your evening." The room erupted into chaos as I walked away, the weight of my actions settling in. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: I was done being the victim. The chaos of the party continued behind me as I left the ballroom, my heart pounding with a mix of triumph and dread. I needed air, space to process what had just unfolded. The cool night air hit me as I stepped onto the hotel's terrace, the city lights flickering in the distance. My mind raced with the implications of my actions. What now? How would Emma and Richard respond? "Jack, wait!" I turned to see Emma hurrying towards me, her face a mask of desperation and confusion. "How could you do that?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "How could I? How could you, Emma? Do you even realize what you've done to us? To our marriage?" Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw a flicker of regret. "I never meant for it to go this far. It was a mistake, Jack. I'm so sorry." "Sorry," I scoffed. "Sorry doesn't cut it. You betrayed me with my boss, Emma. This isn't just a mistake. It's a calculated act of betrayal." Before she could respond, the terrace door swung open and Mark stepped out, followed by a few curious colleagues who had overheard the commotion. Mark approached me, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Jack, you okay?" he asked, glancing between Emma and me. "No, Mark, I'm not okay," I replied, my voice steady. "But thanks for asking. I need some time to think." Emma took a step closer, her voice a pleading whisper. "Please, Jack, can we talk about this in private? Just you and me." I hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Let's find somewhere quiet." We walked in silence to a secluded corner of the terrace, the distant sounds of the city providing a stark contrast to the turmoil within. Emma took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "Jack, I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust, but I need you to understand that it wasn't about you. Richard, he made me feel special, like I mattered." "And I didn't," I interrupted, the pain evident in my voice. "I've always tried to make you feel loved, Emma. Was that not enough?" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "It's not that simple. Richard is, powerful. He made promises and I got caught up in it. But I realize now that it was all a lie. He used me." Before I could respond, the terrace door opened again and Richard himself strode out, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Jack, we need to talk," he demanded, ignoring Emma's presence. "There's nothing to talk about, Richard," I replied coldly. "You've already said enough." Richard's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer. "You think you can just expose us and walk away? This isn't over, Jack. There will be consequences." "Consequences?" I laughed bitterly. "The only consequences you should be worried about are the ones coming for your career. You think the board will stand for this? For your behavior?" A tense silence hung between us, and I could see the gears turning in Richard's mind. He knew I was right, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Listen," he said, his tone shifting to something almost conciliatory. "We can sort this out quietly. No need to involve the board or the media. Let's find a way to move past this." "Move past this," I repeated, incredulous. "There's no moving past this, Richard. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." As the standoff continued, the terrace door opened once more, and two more colleagues emerged: Sarah, a sharp and no-nonsense lawyer from the legal department, and Tom, the head of HR. They had undoubtedly been drawn by the escalating drama. "What's going on here?" Sarah asked, her gaze sweeping over the three of us. "Jack exposed Richard and Emma's affair in front of everyone," Mark explained, having followed them out. "Things are getting heated." Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "This is a mess. We need to address this formally. Jack, Emma, Richard, my office, first thing Monday morning." "Fine," I said, my voice hard. "But don't expect me to be civil about it." Emma wiped her tears, her face a mask of resignation. "Jack, please. Can we at least try to talk this through before Monday?" I looked at her, the woman I had loved and trusted, now a stranger. "We'll talk," I said finally. "But don't expect miracles." The tension on the terrace was palpable as we all stood there, the gravity of the situation sinking in. I turned away from the group, needing to distance myself from the emotions swirling around me. The city lights blurred as I stared into the night, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. How had it come to this? The betrayal, the public humiliation, the uncertain future, it all seemed too much to bear. But one thing was clear: I couldn't let this destroy me. I had to find a way to move forward, to reclaim my life from the wreckage. As I stood there, lost in thought, Mark approached, his hand resting on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Jack. It's going to be tough, but you'll get through this." "Thanks, Mark," I said, appreciating his support. "I hope you're right." We stood in silence for a few moments before heading back inside. The party was still in full swing, though the mood had shifted noticeably. Colleagues eyed us with a mix of sympathy and curiosity, whispering among themselves as we passed. I spotted Sarah and Tom deep in conversation near the bar, undoubtedly discussing the implications of tonight's events. As I made my way through the crowd, Emma caught up to me, her expression pleading. "Jack, please. Can we at least try to find a way to move forward? For the sake of what we once had." I looked at her, the pain in my chest almost unbearable. "We'll see, Emma, we'll see." The rest of the night passed in a blur, the party's once festive atmosphere tainted by the shadow of our confrontation. I stayed just long enough to avoid raising more suspicion before finally making my way home, the weight of the evening's revelations pressing down on me. As I lay in bed that night, sleep eluding me, I knew that the days ahead would be some of the hardest I'd ever faced. But I was determined to come out stronger, to reclaim my life and my dignity. Morning came far too quickly, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, a stark reminder of the reality I now faced. I got up, mechanically going through the motions of getting ready for the day, my mind already on the meeting scheduled for Monday. I knew that facing Richard and Emma again would be difficult, but I was resolved to see it through. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to fight for my future, no matter the cost. As I stepped out into the morning air, I took a deep breath, the fresh start I needed beginning now. The battle was far from over, but I was ready to face it head on, determined to rebuild and find a way forward from the ashes of betrayal. The weekend crawled by, a blur of restless nights and anxious days. Monday morning arrived with a mix of dread and resolve. I dressed in my best suit, every button and crease a shield for the battle ahead. The office loomed ahead as I drove, a fortress of betrayal and lies. When I arrived, the usual buzz of the morning felt different. Colleagues whispered behind their hands, eyes darting towards me with a mix of curiosity and pity. I walked past them with my head held high, refusing to let their gossip affect me. I reached Tom's office right on time. Emma was already there, looking fragile and unsure, her eyes red from crying. Richard arrived moments later, his face set in a mask of defiance. Sarah joined us, her presence a reminder that this was official business now. "Good morning," Tom began, his tone serious. "We're here to address the events of Friday night and the accusations that have come to light." Richard opened his mouth to speak, but Tom held up a hand. "Not yet, Richard. First, we need to hear from Jack." I took a deep breath, meeting Richard's gaze head-on. "Last Friday I overheard Emma on the phone, talking about meeting someone in lingerie they had given her. That someone turned out to be Richard. I saw him heading towards his office right after her call. I decided to expose their affair, knowing full well the consequences it would bring." Emma's lip trembled, but she said nothing. Richard's eyes flashed with anger, but he too remained silent. "Is this true?" Emma Tom asked, his voice gentle but firm. Emma nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, it's true. Richard and we had an affair. It was a mistake, but it happened." Tom sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This is a serious breach of company policy, Richard, not to mention the ethical implications." Richard finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I admit I made a mistake, but Jack's actions were unprofessional and vindictive. He humiliated us in front of the entire company." "And what would you have done if the roles were reversed?" I snapped, unable to keep my anger in check. "You betrayed your wife with my boss, Richard. You expected me to just quietly accept it." Sarah, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "We need to address this situation from both a personal and professional standpoint. Emma, Richard, your actions are indefensible. But Jack, your public confrontation has also caused significant disruption." "What do you propose we do?" Then I asked, my voice calmer now. Tom exchanged a look with Sarah. "Emma and Richard will need to face disciplinary action. As for you, Jack, we need to find a way to address your concerns without further damaging the company's reputation." Richard's face turned red with fury. "Disciplinary action? You can't be serious. Jack is the one who turned this into a spectacle." "Enough." Richard, Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "Your behavior is inexcusable, and you need to accept the consequences." Richard clenched his fists, but he remained silent, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "Jack, we need to ensure that this situation is resolved in a way that allows everyone to move forward," Tom said. "What do you need from us to make that happen?" I took a deep breath, considering my options. "I want a transfer, away from Richard and this office. I need a fresh start." Tom nodded. "That can be arranged. We'll find a suitable position for you in another branch. As for Emma and Richard, we'll handle their disciplinary process internally." Emma looked up, her eyes pleading. "Jack, please, can we talk? Just the two of us." I hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's step outside." We walked out of the office into the hallway, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. "Jack, I'm so sorry," Emma began, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you, but please, don't end our marriage because of this. We can work through it." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so long, now a stranger. "Emma, you broke my trust. How can we move past that?" Tears streamed down her face. "I know it will take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. I don't want to lose you." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I need time to think, Emma. This isn't something I can just forgive overnight." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand. Just know that I'm here, and I want to make things right." We stood in silence for a moment before I turned and walked back into the office. Tom and Sarah were deep in discussion, but they looked up as I entered. "Jack, we'll get the transfer process started immediately," Tom said. "We'll do everything we can to make this transition as smooth as possible." "Thank you," I replied, my voice tired but resolute. As I left the office, the weight of the situation pressed down on me. My marriage was in tatters, my career uncertain, but I knew that I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't let this betrayal define me. The next few days were a blur of meetings and paperwork as the transfer process began. I avoided Emma as much as possible, needing space to process everything. Richard, meanwhile, kept a low profile, his usual arrogance replaced by a wary tension. On my last day in the office, Mark found me packing up my things. "Hey man, how are you holding up?" "I've been better," I admitted, forcing a smile. "But I'm getting through it." Mark nodded, his expression serious. "You did the right thing, Jack. Don't ever doubt that." "Thanks, Mark. Your support means a lot." As I left the office for the final time, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The future was uncertain, but I was determined to face it head-on. The road ahead would be challenging, but I knew I had the strength to overcome it. I arrived at my new office a few days later, greeted by fresh faces and new opportunities. It was a chance to rebuild, to start over. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the distraction it provided. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the pain of betrayal began to fade. Emma reached out several times, asking for another chance, but I needed more time. The wounds were still too fresh. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, the city lights twinkling outside, I realized that I had finally found a measure of peace. The betrayal had scarred me, but it hadn't broken me. I was stronger than I had ever realized. As I looked out over the city, I knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more trials, but I was ready to face them. With a deep breath, I stood up, ready to embrace whatever the future held. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Months passed since I transferred to the new branch. Life began to stabilize, but the echoes of betrayal still lingered in the background. I had thrown myself into work, earning respect and admiration from my new colleagues. The fresh start had been therapeutic, but there was still a gaping hole where my trust in Emma once resided. One evening, as I was about to leave the office, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark, urgent. "Need to talk. Meet me at our old office." A chill ran down my spine. Mark wasn't one for dramatic, so whatever this was, it had to be serious. I arrived at the old office, the memories of my confrontation with Richard and Emma flooding back. Mark was waiting for me in the lobby, his expression tense. "Thanks for coming, Jack," he said, glancing around nervously. "I found something. Something big." "What is it, Mark?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. He led me to a conference room and closed the door behind us. "After you left, I kept an eye on things. I didn't trust Richard. Something didn't add up." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward. "Remember the security footage I got for you? Well, I dug deeper. There's more to this than just an affair." Mark pulled out a laptop and started a video. It showed Richard and another man I didn't recognize meeting late at night in Richard's office. The man handed Richard a thick envelope, which Richard opened, revealing stacks of cash. "What the hell is this?" I asked, stunned. "That's not all," Mark said, fast-forwarding the video. "Watch this." The footage showed Emma arriving at the office, looking nervous. She handed Richard a flash drive, and they spoke in hushed tones. I couldn't hear the conversation, but Richard's satisfied grin spoke volumes. "I don't understand," I said, shaking my head. "What's going on?" "Jack, I think Emma was being blackmailed," Mark said, his voice grave. "I've been monitoring Richard's emails. He was threatening her, forcing her to get company secrets. That's what the flash drive was, confidential information." My heart sank as the pieces fell into place. Emma hadn't just been unfaithful, she had been coerced into betraying me and the company. "Why didn't she tell me?" I asked, anger and sorrow mixing in my voice. "She probably thought you wouldn't believe her, or that Richard would make good on his threats," Mark replied. "We need to confront Richard. He can't get away with this." I nodded, the determination surging through me. "Let's do it." We marched to Richard's office, adrenaline pumping. Bursting through the door, we found Richard at his desk, his eyes widening in surprise. "Jack, what are you doing here?" he asked, feigning innocence. "We know everything, Richard," I said, throwing the laptop on his desk. The blackmail, the threats, it's all over. Richard's face paled as he saw the footage. This is ridiculous. You have no proof. Actually, we do, Mark said, pulling out a stack of printed emails. These are your emails, Richard. You've been caught red-handed. Richard's facade crumbled, and he slumped back in his chair. All right, fine. What do you want? We're going to the board, I said. You're finished here. Richard's eyes flickered with desperation. Wait, we can make a deal. I'll resign quietly, no need for a scandal. Just let me walk away. I exchanged a look with Mark. And Emma, I asked. You leave her out of this. She was a victim. Richard nodded eagerly. Fine. Just let me go. Pack your things and be gone by the end of the day, I said coldly. If you ever come near me or Emma again, I'll make sure you regret it. Richard hurriedly packed his belongings, and we watched as he left, a broken man. The weight of the betrayal and subsequent revelation settled heavily on my shoulders, but there was a sense of justice served. That evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone. I needed to talk to Emma. I needed answers. I dialed her number, my heart pounding. Jack, she answered, her voice filled with apprehension. Emma, we need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can you come over? She agreed, and within the hour she was at my door. We sat in silence for a moment before I spoke. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I was scared, Jack. Richard threatened me, said he would ruin us both if I didn't cooperate. I didn't know what to do. I took a deep breath, the anger and betrayal still simmering beneath the surface. You should have trusted me. We could have faced it together. I know, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I was weak. I made a terrible mistake. We sat in silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Finally, I spoke. I need time, Emma, to process all of this, but I believe you, and I believe we can get through this. Emma looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Thank you, Jack. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. As the days passed, we began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt and pain, but the truth had been revealed, and with it, a chance for healing. Richard's departure from the company was swift and unceremonious. The board conducted a thorough investigation, uncovering more of his illicit activities. He was facing legal consequences, and the company began to recover from the scandal. Emma and I attended counseling, working through our issues one step at a time. The road to forgiveness was long, but with each passing day we grew stronger, more united in our resolve to overcome the past. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of our apartment, looking out over the city, Emma took my hand. I'm so sorry for everything, Jack, she said softly. I promise to never let anything come between us again. I squeezed her hand, feeling a sense of peace. I believe you, Emma, and I promise to always stand by you no matter what. As the city lights twinkled in the distance, I knew that our story was far from over. There would be more challenges, more trials, but together we would face them. The betrayal had tested us, but it had also brought us closer, revealing the strength of our bond. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful about the future.